I do not understand what I do, but for what I want I do, chesed, son of Shalumia, Ahiez, or Pedaz, or... That really means something, doesn't it? All right, right now we're going to look at the importance of seeking truth and kind of what Horizon Zero Dawn has to say about the importance of acquiring, gaining, and retaining knowledge, and seeking, or seeking truth, we might say. Seeking truth is kind of the motto of the Spirit Blade Underground podcast, which is the official podcast of Christian Geek Central. So obviously that's something that I believe that we as Christians can absolutely get behind, because truth has nothing to fear from investigation. And I firmly believe that the more you consistently investigate all matters of truth, ultimately you're going to find that the Bible is absolutely consistent with a search, an uncompromising search for truth.
I can't stop thinking about the ones who come after us. Those innocents. Those blameless men and women. We're gonna give them knowledge? Like it's a gift?
Ted. We've talked about this before. Apollo has 3,000 plus fail-safe conditions.
It's not a gift, it's a disease. They're the cure, and we're gonna give them the disease. Our disease? No, we can't. And it's not too late. If we're willing to sacrifice.
It doesn't need to be like this.
It already is, Samina. I did it 3 minutes ago. I've purged Apollo. It's gone. All of it. Every copy.
Sacrifice? It's not a sacrifice. It's cultural obliteration, you crazy bastard. Millennia of culture.
I'm sorry. Really, I am. But sometimes, to protect innocence have to die.
Emergency alert. Captain atmosphere.
So Ted, this character is the wealthy industrialist that caused all these problems and stuff like that. So he is kind of like the bad guy. He's not like an evil maniac, but he's just a foolish man who causes a lot of problems for everybody. And his position here is that knowledge is evil, that we cause these problems because of our knowledge, and so we should remove knowledge, because this Apollo program, if you don't remember or you haven't played the game, is meant to archive all human knowledge from human history, so that the new humans that are generated from these embryos after the apocalypse is long over will be able to access this knowledge and not make the same mistakes that we have. They'll have the advantages of all that we've learned, and they'll be able to retain our culture, Ted is wanting to throw all that away and say, no, those were the problems, those were the cause of our problems. We don't want them to inherit all of our mistakes, and they'll inherit our mistakes if they have this knowledge. So this kind of like almost knowledge is evil kind of view. And I definitely think as Christians we want to reject that. I'm not sure, with this guy saying, culture, we're losing millennia of culture, or whatever. I don't know that culture is all that important. I think truth preservation is important. Truth preservation is vital. If we don't preserve truth, if we don't seek truth, then we can wind up with a culture, like I think we have in many respects today, that doesn't value truth, doesn't seek truth. And I don't know that that's a culture we really want to be having affect us and dictate how we prioritize our lives. So truth preservation is absolutely vital.
He killed them all.
So this is why. This is why we were trapped in benighted ignorance for an innocent future. Blameless men. He never saw the slaughter in the sun ring.
And here we have the idea expressed that knowledge would have saved us from religious violence. The arena thing that he's referring to, the sun arena, I can't remember what he said. That was like these kind of like gladiatorial type games that were ultimately brought about by a religious institution, this sun-worshipping religion, And so his point here is, if we would have had this knowledge, we wouldn't have these religious things, and people wouldn't have died in those arenas, you know. And I think likewise, as believers, we can absolutely back that kind of position. Yes, there have absolutely been horrible things that have been perpetrated by religious people, including Christians. And we want to reject that. And knowledge would have prevented those things from happening if those people would have submitted to the truth of what Scripture actually teaches, rather than twisting it and kind of creating this monstrosity that serves their agenda for power or whatever it is that they're after. If they would have submitted to truth and a search for truth, then they would have seen what Scripture actually teaches, and they would have submitted and conformed their lives to that. So, yeah, I guess I'm throwing that word submit in there. It's important that we not just gain truth, but that we actually submit to that which is true. We acknowledge it as being real, and we orient our lives based on what is true. So, yeah, I think we can back this idea that knowledge saves us from religious violence if we seek the truth and then submit to the truth that's revealed.
The things you've done in the pursuit of knowledge, Silence, pure recklessness.
Aloy, this wasn't a confession to elicit your judgment.
Unbelievable.
Silence is an interesting character to me. He really pursues knowledge throughout the story of this game without moral restraint. And Aloy calls him on this here, and once again, she's kind of judgmental, you know. And I don't know that I would want to take on her tone and her attitude. I don't think that's really helpful to this exchange. But I do think that we should reject the idea that knowledge should be pursued without moral restraint. So I think the spirit, the virtues, the value that Aloy has there, I think is something that we can absolutely agree with.
Hello, old friend. Remember me? We've still so much to discuss. So much you never revealed. Your masters, for example. The ones who sent the signal that woke you. Knowledge has its rewards, don't you think? Well, let's begin.
Okay, this is from the very end of the game. It's a post-credits scene where Silence kind of either resurrects Hades or welcomes Hades, you know, after Hades resurrects itself or something, I don't know. But he partners with Hades to pursue knowledge again. Silence is a much more cold and natural outworking of purely naturalistic philosophy. I don't think that what we would call optimal and superior moral values naturally come out of like a purely naturalistic or atheistic view. They don't objectively and naturally come out of that. I think more naturally you're going to have something that is more cold and that does not value life and just values knowledge and personal growth and personal adaptation and stuff like that, which I think what we see being played out here with Silence. I really look forward to seeing him in the next game. Philosophically, I'd love to see him as the villain. I think he'd be a good fit for that. But from a gameplay and character perspective, I think it would be really interesting to play him as the main character. I'm kind of tired of Aloy and her, you know, judgmental attitude and stuff, and I'd rather play someone who is an out-and-out villain that maybe has an interesting arc or something like that, you know. So I don't know. I'm just getting tired of Aloy, and I'm more interested in seeing what they do with Silence. But anyway, that could be a fascinating arc. Okay, now the following clip here is the audio recording of Silence fooling the Karja, this tribe of people, in partnership with Hades, this evil AI, and Hades is joining in on the masquerade and quoting Karja scripture to convince them that he's like a spiritual being of some kind. Take a listen.
They're coming.
Preparations are complete.
Lucent Bahabas. Behold, as I promised you.
What manner of great machine is this? I've never seen such a thing. Stay! Stay your ground, Carja in shadow!
Incorrect. Bow before the buried shadow.
The buried shadow, I don't understand.
Did Ahriman understand the glint hawk that perched upon the alight?
It speaks scripture.
Ahriman followed the shadow cast from the spire.
To the mesa where Holy Meridian was founded.
You will follow the shadow once more.
I am a righteous man, chosen of the sun. But in times of need, the powers of shadow can accomplish what the sun alone cannot. Will you return to us what is ours, O shadow of prophecy?
An army is required. Obey, and Meridian is yours.
Of our obedience you can be certain.
So this Karja holy man is willing to take a dark path when it suits him. And I think that's an indirect acknowledgement, maybe, that religious violence can also come from people twisting Scripture to serve selfish desires. I can't speak for Scripture outside of the Bible, but yeah, I think that's what's going on when we see people who either are Christians or who are just claiming to be Christians doing these horrible things. And they're saying it's what the Bible is teaching. They are twisting and not correctly interpreting the Bible based on its historical and grammatical context and its genre of writing. Lots of things that are really important to take into account. So, I think this would be an example of that. And I think that, we can affirm the reality that, sometimes holy people, people that are desiring to be set apart for the purposes of God, can instead turn down a dark path when it suits them, and they can even be willing to believe false things and distortions of Scripture.
It was a children's electronics kit, but I hacked the wiring to an auto battery and solar PV, so the grass caught fire. And so did a tall pine. My mother was home, thank God, so she called the fire department, and after, she took me out to the lawn and showed me the dead baby birds. And that's when my mother took my face in her hands and she said, "Elizabeth, being smart will count for nothing if you don't make the world better. You have to use your smarts to count for something, to serve life, not death."
All right, so this is from the end of the game, right before the credits roll. We've got this line, "Being smart will count for nothing if you don't make the world better." That feels like this is like the final statement that the game wants to make philosophically. Being smart will count for nothing if you don't make the world better. And what's interesting, I don't know, if Dr. Sobek's mother was a naturalist, or even for sure if Dr. Sobek was a naturalist. That's just the impression that I get. But in a naturalistic context, I have to ask, okay, well, it'll count for nothing according to who? If something's going to count for something, well, count according to who? What counts? What has value to count? Or make the world better? Better according to who? What does better mean, So we're wanting to affirm, and I think that the naturalist is wanting to affirm these good things morally. But I think it's hard on the naturalistic view to get very specific because, again, there is no objective basis for moral values. Another example of kind of that vague language would be when this character says, you have to use your smarts to count for something, to serve life, not death. Well, can we be a little more specific than that? Because viruses are a form of life, a very destructive form of life, but they are a form of life. But again, why serve any form of life? So I think in the context of the naturalism being put forth by the game, which I do think is what's going on, I see some inconsistency in this final kind of message being put out there. That said, I think we can absolutely affirm what's being said here. I think we can affirm it more logically and effectively from the Christian worldview than from the naturalist worldview. Being smart will count for nothing if you don't make the world better. That's absolutely true. And you have to use your smarts to count for something, to serve life, not death. Absolutely. We have an objective basis for these values, and so we can absolutely affirm that.